directly told that London thought I was being unpatriotic and not supporting the war on terror. When London really started getting hostile was when I started saying that MI6 didn't ought to be accepting intelligence from the Uzbek security services because it had been got under torture. As far as the CIA were concerned, torture was part of the game now, post-September the 11th. Obviously I found that fairly shocking. So I went back to London, complained about intelligence obtained under torture, and also I said that the intelligence was rubbish anyway. It was all this stuff saying that, Hizb ut-Tahrir are connected to Al-Qaeda and the Uzbek opposition are connected to Osama bin Laden. It was all not true. It was what the Uzbeks and the CIA wanted us to believe, in effect. It wasn't actually the truth. And when I started saying that, London got very tetchy indeed. Eventually, they got rid of me. They sacked me in effect.
How do you view the war on terror?
It seems to me that politicians have got an interest in talking up the threat, making everyone feel scared, and in doing so, effectively criminalising the Muslim community in the UK in order to increase their own power. And the security services have got an interest in feeding the politicians with intelligence material that exaggerates the threat, because that increases not only the powers but also the budgets of the security services. I mean, you think of when they were sending tanks to Heathrow Airport, and if someone was trying to hijack a plane or put a bomb on a plane, what use would the tank be? Seriously, how do you stop a man getting on a plane using a tank? It was complete public relations hype, and I think that's what an awful lot of this war on terror is. I think people should be profoundly sceptical, both of the politicians and of the police and the intelligence services.
Can you please describe to me the general economic situation in Uzbekistan from your experience?
Yeah, I mean, the economic situation is pretty terrible. A lot of the business empire is controlled by the president's daughter, and she's been the major beneficiary of the little privatisation that happens. There are also other trades. Uzbekistan borders Afghanistan, and the regime itself is heavily implicated in the narcotics trade, and in particular links between General Dostum and Karimov are very strong. And although the UN and the British government and others have spent a lot of money on customs facilities and border facilities to try and stop drug trafficking, whole fleets of vehicles between Dostum and Karimov go backwards and forwards, and they're not stopped by customs or passport control or anyone. And that's actually carrying the major narcotics trade. The Karimov family is also implicated in trafficking in women, with a large number, thousands every year, of young Uzbek women sent as prostitutes to Dubai. And again, the regime itself is implicated in all this kind of stuff.
So what has brought you from such a high position as an ambassador in Tashkent to Blackburn?
Yeah, it's an unusual journey, I think it's fair to say. Well, plainly it was impossible for me to pursue my career any further in the Foreign Office, because you can't any longer have a career in the British diplomatic service unless you're prepared to go along 100% with George Bush and go along with the war on terror.
Okay, in my recent interview with Craig Murray, the former British ambassador to Uzbekistan, he informed me that members of Hizb ut-Tahrir in Uzbekistan are the main political prisoners, and also they suffer tortures such as being boiled to death. But here in Britain, you seem to have a very good opportunity to be part of the political democratic process, where you can have an influence in the system and policy making, yet you seem to reject that opportunity. What would you say to that?
Yes, we do have a golden opportunity in Britain. We have the golden opportunity to define what political activism really is. Political activism is to take our affairs into our own hands. It's to be a self-reliant community. It's to be an economically strong community. It's to be a community which really is the voice for the Muslim Ummah abroad. It's to be a community of social ills that come from Western society out of our communities. Political activism in Britain is actually about taking our affairs into our own hands.
I'd just like to refer to one of your latest press releases on MCB website, dated 13th March, which is just last week really. You stated that in the press release, we hope that we will see increased number of British Muslims taking up positions in our armed forces, just as they have done so in other sectors of our society. Now, to a lot of Muslims in this country, this may seem outrageous, as they see these very British troops responsible for killing thousands of innocent Muslims in Afghanistan and Iraq. How would you justify your stance to them?
The statement that was issued was in response to the visit of the Chief of Defence Staff, which he attended a reception organised at the Islamic Culture Centre. Now, the real purpose was to get the message across to him. As we all know, Army is an important institution in the country, like the police, Department of Health, transportation, where people would want to either get employed and provide the service to the community. Now, Army is again an important institution. Of course, if our country was not at war, and I believe the role of the Army is to defend our shores. So there is no aggression in this country, but not to be aggressors ourselves. Therefore, in this way, there are different ways of getting the message. And I believe that this particular reception was an eye-opener for the General and his deputy and others that were there, that look, if you want the Muslim community to participate in the Army, to be part of it, there will be a problem if our country pursues policies which are unjust and unfair.
I think that it's a very erroneous idea to claim that Muslims should blindly accept all institutions in this society and engage with these institutions because we fundamentally believe in Islam and we believe in our Ummah. The British Army has engaged in a very brutal campaign against the Muslims of Iraq and previous to that against the Muslims of Afghanistan. Are you telling me that it is our civic duty to join an army that is engaging in warfare against the Muslims? It's ludicrous. Quite frankly, it is the lowest form of politics that we can engage in as a Muslim community.
Just like to come back to that. I mean, if we look at historically, British troops are seen as colonial troops, going back to the days of colony and empire building. Many Muslims see British troops as colonial troops, and they really don't want to sort of align themselves on the same lines, and they don't want to call British troops our troops. They have some sort of reluctance to do that, to take that stance. Yeah. So when you call them our troops, they may argue on the other hand that these are not our troops. How would you respond to that sort of stance?
Well, first of all, I think as far as the Britain being a colonial power was in the past, we left the last stages of the colonies in the 50s and 60s. Where the countries became independent in Asia, in Africa as well. And since then, Britain has not really colonized any countries. So that's the important fact which we need to be aware of.
Many people argue that your approach to politics creates a distance between the Muslims and the non-Muslim population in Britain. Now, how can the Muslims live harmoniously with the non-Muslim population in a non-Muslim society? How can they achieve their political interests while retaining their Islamic morals and values?
Now, it's wrong to say that either you have participation in the narrow political parties and on the other side you have isolation. Rather, self-reliance means that you begin to reach out to the wider society who is affected, quite frankly, by the capitalist policies, by the Western policies, and begin to show them the greatness of Islam, the beauty of Islam, its rules, its regulations, its morals, its codes. Our community needs to live as an Islamic community. We need to really have a very strong relationship with the wider non-Muslim society. I would say that when Muslims begin to become Labour Muslims or Lib Dem Muslims or conservative Muslims, that's really when we begin to erode our value system.
Army is also an important institution for our country. Yes, we are unhappy with the situation about the war. But God forbid, if our Britain was invaded, hypothetically, would it be right for us to say that no, we don't